This is a full story. Puppy wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. I've been taking care of Rocky's cat for 5 years, but tonight, it suddenly bit me as I walked in the door. Sitting in the car on the way to the hospital, I suddenly understood something. Some cats can never truly be domesticated. The same goes for people. So when I got home, I told Rocky I wanted a divorce. He frowned, confused, and asked, "Just because the cat bit you?" "Yes, because of that." "Are you sure? Our 5-year anniversary is just a month away." Rocky was holding the cat, absent-mindedly playing with its tail. Strangely, after we got married, Rocky rarely came home, barely seeing the cat at all. Even though I was the one feeding it every day, it only seemed to like Rocky. I shifted my gaze from the cat and said calmly, "Yes, I'm sure. I'll leave with nothing, just sign the papers, and we can handle the divorce tomorrow." I placed the divorce papers in front of Rocky. He glanced at the documents on the table, then looked at me, frowning. "Haley, are you really giving up our 5-year marriage just because Juno bit you?" Juno was the name Rocky gave the cat. As he called its name, Juno meowed up at him, softly and affectionately, a far cry from the hostile growls it gave me. "Yes," I nodded, looking away. "Just because of it." And it was true. It was thanks to Juno that I found the resolve to ask for a divorce from Rocky. Yesterday, filming for my new project was supposed to start, but the director suddenly told me, "You've been replaced." I recognized the actress who took my place. Her name and Rocky's have been all over social media lately. Hard not to notice. Plus, Rocky's family company was a major investor in this film, so I called Rocky directly. "I was replaced. Was this your doing?" His tone was indifferent. "Yes." His voice was cold, and he gave a simple reason: the Rocky Group doesn't need you earning money. Just stay home and take care of Juno. With that, all my hard work for this role was dismissed. My assistant practically dragged me home, and just as I was changing shoes in the entryway, Juno suddenly rushed out and bit me. Looking at the wound on my arm, I finally broke down. 5 years of raising Juno, but it still saw me as an enemy. It hated me, never letting me get close, and would even attack if I let my guard down. The cat was like Rocky in that way, too. 5 years of marriage, and he was still cold to me. He never even agreed to make our marriage public. To the world, he's the eligible heir of the Rocky Group, and I'm just a low-tier actress. We have no visible connection. The only time we were linked was when a tabloid spotted us in the same frame, and his rumored girlfriend publicly labeled me a third party in their relationship. I've had enough of this life. I don't want to be a free nanny to a cat that will never warm up to me. Nor do I want to continue living this hidden life with Rocky. We have no children and no assets to divide. Divorce will be simple, just like when we got married. We just signed the papers, had a meal with his parents, and that was it. Rocky's only requirement for marrying me was to keep it private. So, we had no wedding, no ceremony of any kind. After we signed the divorce papers, Rocky gestured for me to get in the car. "Grandma wants to see you." For a moment, I felt like I was back in time, 9 years ago. Back then, my family had just gone bankrupt, and my parents had passed away. Relatives avoided me like the plague, scared I'd be a burden. Homeless on the streets, Rocky appeared like a god, pulling me out of despair. When someone's utterly hopeless, even a tiny bit of warmth feels monumental. So even years later, despite Rocky's indifference, I always remembered that day he took my hand and said, "Come with me, Grandma wants to meet you." Rocky's grandmother took pity on me and let me stay in their home. When we were old enough, she suddenly brought up the idea of me and Rocky getting married. The marriage was arranged when you two were kids, but I still want to ask you first, would you like to marry Rocky? I blushed deeply. I had always known about the engagement. Before my family went bankrupt, in my youthful dreams, I always wished to marry Rocky. But after that, I dared not dream of it anymore. Even though my feelings for Rocky had only grown, I knew my place. I was just an orphan living under their roof. You might want to ask Rocky first. I knew Rocky already had someone he liked, so the engagement was doomed. But to my surprise, Rocky actually agreed. Only in the 2nd month of marriage did I accidentally find out the reason. "Aren't you not interested in Haley? Why did you marry her all of a sudden?" That was Rocky's good friend, Bame, speaking. Rocky, lounging on the sofa, was casually playing with the cat. He answered offhandedly, "Serena married someone else, so it doesn't matter who I marry." Serena was the woman Rocky liked. I bit my lip and took 2 steps back. Just as I was leaving, I heard Rocky add, "It's just a formal marriage. I won't touch anyone but Serena. Besides, I've always thought of Haley as a sister." Bame scoffed, marrying your own sister? That's sick. After returning to Rocky's house, I slipped the divorce certificate into my bag and went alone to see his grandmother. If not for her, Rocky and his family wouldn't have agreed to this divorce so easily. Thank you, Grandma. She patted my hand and sighed, if I hadn't pushed for this marriage, you wouldn't have had to suffer so much. It's my fault. I thought having Rocky give you Juno would make him visit you more often. But she didn't know that Rocky cherished Juno because it was a gift from the woman he loved. I knelt beside her, head bowed, silent. She sighed again. If only that child of yours was still here. At her words, I immediately interrupted. It's in the past, Grandma. I had no desire to revisit that painful memory. Before I left, Rocky's grandmother handed me a card. Knowing I couldn't refuse, I decided I'd give it back to Rocky and have him return it to her. When I found him, he was speaking with his mother. Haley's had it too easy in our house. She's never suffered. Once she's out there struggling, she'll come back begging for reconciliation. I stood behind him, forced a bitter smile, laughing silently to myself, until Rocky turned and noticed me. His expression changed slightly, and he seemed at a loss for words. I smiled as I handed him the card his grandmother gave me, then turned and left. After a few steps, I couldn't resist looking back at him. Rocky, I won't be coming back. He looked at me with narrowed eyes and sneered. Don't be so sure. I smiled softly, saying nothing more. After all these years, Rocky still doesn't understand me at all. After leaving Rocky's house, I immediately bought a plane ticket to New York. This time, I'm going to fulfill the dream I had at 18. I've been in the entertainment industry for years. Some peers have reached the top, but I've remained an unknown. Back in school, the teachers who praised my looks and talent now only sigh when they mention me, disappointed in my career. Once, during a visit to my old school, I overheard one of them say, she was gifted with a bowl of rice from the gods, yet she insists on breaking the bowl. I used to believe it was impossible to live a perfectly fulfilling life. You gain some, you lose some. Just like Rocky once said, being Rocky's wife isn't easy. Indeed, being his wife wasn't easy. Right after we married, his first demand was for me to leave the industry. I fought hard for myself, acting is my dream. But to Rocky, my dream seemed utterly laughable. He looked at me with undisguised disdain. A dream? Haley, I don't ever want to hear that word from you again. I've since forgotten how I managed to convince him to let me stay. All I remember is that Rocky left that day, clearly displeased. He said, if you want to keep acting, you'll have to do it on my terms. To meet his terms, I could only take on minor, insignificant roles. To me, just being able to act was enough. But then, a paparazzi shot of us together got me labeled as the other woman. Rocky's rumored girlfriend assumed I was intruding, and I was attacked online. Can we go public? I begged Rocky, we're married. Why should I be called a third wheel? I'm tired of the public curses and slander. Rocky didn't even look at me. His tone was cold. Celebrity harassment is common. If you can't handle it, maybe you aren't fit for this industry. Haley, maybe it's time you faced reality and left the industry. After that, I was constantly pressured to quit. I kept trying, but no director wanted to cast an actress so publicly disgraced. Recently, I finally landed a small role, only for Rocky to replace me. I thought I'd never get another chance on screen. But the day after I asked Rocky for a divorce, I received an unexpected invitation to audition in New York. The director was Peter, a young, emerging talent. I followed the address in the email. Hi, I'm Haley. I introduced myself to a staff member. Haley? The staff member's eyes widened. After a moment of shock, he quickly turned to shout, Peter. He said something in Cantonese, which I couldn't understand, but it made everyone present stop and look at me. Then Peter walked out. He had a striking face, vibrant and captivating, enough to rival any actor. I couldn't help but think he'd make a great idol himself. Hi, I'm Peter. Haley. The audition went smoothly. I decided to stay in New York to prepare for the role. The staff member I'd first met was named Jack. As we got to know each other, my curiosity got the better of me. What did you say in Cantonese the first time we met? Jack, with a Hong Kong accent, replied, nothing really. I just said, Peter, your lead actress has arrived. Peter's been preparing for this movie for a long time. He's been waiting for you. He sent you so many emails, but you never responded. In the past, my assistant handled my emails and social accounts. She filtered my job offers and ran them by Rocky before I could see them. Only after the divorce did I gain control over my own email and work choices. Haley, did you know? Jack leaned close, speaking in a conspiratorial whisper. Peter's actually a huge fan of yours. He hadn't finished speaking when a bright light flashed behind us. It was Peter bringing over a midnight snack. Jack ran off at the sight of food. Peter walked over to me. Aren't you going to eat something? I shook my head. Not hungry. The night air in New York was thick with a salty breeze. Peter sat beside me. Aren't you eating? He smiled and shook his head. Not hungry either. Suddenly, Jack's words came to mind, and I glanced at Peter, slightly self-conscious. It was subtle, but he caught it. Peter's brows furrowed with curiosity, glancing over at Jack. Did Jack say something to you just now? After a pause, I replied, he said you're a fan of mine. Peter admitted openly, yes, I am. I froze for a moment. I'd assumed Jack was just joking. I've seen all your work. Hearing this, I suddenly felt that Jack's superfan comment wasn't an exaggeration. Thinking of my movies, often labeled as a flops, I awkwardly rubbed my nose. Peter seemed to read my thoughts. Yeah, the movies weren't great, but you were. He added, Haley, you're a talented actress. It was a cloudy night, the sky dark, yet in Peter's eyes, I saw a glimmer that felt as bright as starlight. Since my parents' passing, I hadn't heard someone acknowledge me like this. I stood there, lost in thought for a long time. For 5 years of marriage to Rockey, I'd faced constant doubt. As an actress, I'd achieved little, and Rockey dismissed my career, telling me to quit. As a wife, I failed to win his heart, and his mother implied it was my fault. Only after leaving Rockey's house did I realize I wasn't as awful or inadequate as they'd made me believe. I was worthy, and there were people who could see that. In New York, rituals matter. After a grand opening ceremony, the crew officially began filming. The next time I heard from Rockey was late one night, just after we wrapped a shoot. He sounded like he'd been drinking, his voice rough as he asked, "Where did you go? Do you know Juno got hurt?" I hadn't expected him to call me. After a pause, I finally spoke, reminding him, "Rockey, we're divorced." I thought for a moment before adding, if you're too busy to care for Juno, you could send him back to the old house. Or hire someone to look after him. There was silence on the other end for a long while. I thought Rockey might have sobered up a bit. He explained, I drank too much, that's why I called. Sorry for disturbing your rest. I responded softly, walked over to the window, and told him seriously, Rockey, don't call me again. Then I hung up and blocked his number. Filming these past few days had been exhausting. After showering, I nearly passed out as soon as I hit the bed. When I woke up the next morning, I suddenly saw a message in the group chat about filming being temporarily paused. I was instantly alert. I called Peter immediately. He didn't pick up after several tries, so I called Jack. Haley, Peter says filming is on hold for the next few days. The investors pulled out suddenly, and Peter's trying to talk to them. For some reason, I thought of Rockey's call last night. It wasn't that I was being sentimental. It was just that I remembered what Rockey had said as I was leaving his house. Haley's lived too well at the Rockey estate, hasn't had any real struggles. Give her a few tough days outside, and she'll come back begging for reconciliation. A chill ran through me. Later that evening, I finally got a message back from Peter. It was just 2 words, open the door. I quickly put down my script and jogged to the door. Before I opened it, I was planning to ask him what had happened. But when I saw Peter's nonchalant smile, the questions on my lips faded. Strangely enough, it was as if he had some kind of magic. Just seeing him made all my anxious feelings quiet down. Jack said you didn't eat dinner. You mentioned wanting to try this place, and I happened to pass by on the way back, so I got you a takeout. Peter handed me a takeout box. As I took it, I could smell the aroma of black chicken soup. I'd heard Jack say there was a place in New York that made excellent black chicken soup, but I hadn't had a chance to try it since we'd been busy shooting. Thank you. As I spoke, I suddenly noticed that Peter's expensive watch was missing. Not only the watch, his clothes and shoes had been replaced with basic, low-cost items. There was even a $15 tag on the collar of his t-shirt. His sports car keys were also nowhere in sight. After a pause, I asked, will filming start again tomorrow? Not yet. Peter hesitated, then continued, everyone's been really tired. Let's take another 2 days off. He'd sold his car, his watch, and probably even his clothes and shoes. If filming couldn't resume, it meant the funding issue hadn't been resolved. Peter, can you do me a favor? Being from New York, he knew his way around here better than I did. So I asked him to help me find a reliable pawn shop. My mother's bracelet was the only valuable thing I had left. Back when my family went bankrupt, the bracelet had been pawned for debt. I'm not sure how it ended up with Rockey later. One day, after the paparazzi caught him with some rumored girlfriend, I received the bracelet the next morning. I suppose he thought of it as a form of compensation. Over the years, I'd received a lot of compensations. But when I left Rockey's house, this was the only thing I took with me. Its value had gone up over the years. $9 million. Is that enough? I handed the card to Peter. You sold the bracelet. For me? Peter held the card, staring at me with wide eyes, overwhelmed. You did this for me. I interrupted him. It's not for you. It's for our movie. It's for myself. Peter, you know, don't you? I haven't acted in a long time. It's not because I don't want to. It's because no one would hire me. Even when I reached out, I was turned down. So, Peter, do you understand what this movie means to me? Peter's sports car had been replaced by a second-hand motorcycle. He sat on it, long legs planted on the ground, his expression shifting from slight disappointment to resolute determination.
Yeah.
Peter thumbed the card in his hand. I won't let you down. I believe in you. I smiled at him. I believe in myself, too. But in the end, Peter returned the card to me. He said, it's not necessary to give that much. 3 million will be enough. Back at the hotel, I thought it over and bought a plane ticket to Toronto before bed. Right before takeoff, I received a message from Peter. *, there's a fireworks show at Victoria Harbour tonight. Want to go see it? *. I replied, *, on the plane, heading to Toronto for some business. *. He replied quickly, *, the shoot resumes tomorrow. Can you be back by then? *, I'll be back tonight. *. After a moment, I added, *, maybe I'll catch the fireworks show. *, great, I'll wait for your return. *. I smiled, shut off my phone, and didn't reply to his last message. It was a weekday, so Rockey was probably at the office. Hello, I'm here to see Rockey. The receptionist didn't recognize me. I'm sorry, but we can't let you up without an appointment. When I mentioned Rockey's name, a man in a business suit behind her gave me a quick, appraising look. He muttered, women these days think they can latch onto a rich man if they're pretty enough. She probably doesn't know that our boss Rockey has never been short of beautiful women. He didn't speak loudly, but just loud enough for me to hear. I glanced at him, saying nothing. I was debating whether to take Rockey off my blocked list and arrange to meet him when I suddenly saw his assistant coming out of the elevator. The assistant noticed me, jogged over, and asked, are you here to see Mr. Rockey? I can take you up. I nodded. Rockey looked a bit surprised to see me, but he quickly recovered, his mouth lifting slightly with a hint of mockery. So, you've come back? I didn't respond. I walked over and placed the card on his desk. When I left Rockey's home, I took my mother's bracelet with me. I paid you back some before. This card has the remaining amount. Rockey frowned, glancing at the card on his desk, then back up at me. Where did you get the money? He knew that when I left, I had nothing but the bracelet. I sold the bracelet. Rockey was incredulous. You sold your mother's heirloom? That was the only thing she left you. The mockery on his lips deepened. Haley, Rockey always liked to assume this superior tone with me. We've known each other for so many years. If you come back now, you can still be Mrs. Rockey. He thought I was only back because I couldn't make it on my own. To him, I was a canary, only suited to be kept in a cage. He never believed in me. No need. I declined him in a calm tone. But Rockey was still furious. He threw my card to the floor. Haley, you came back just to repay me? I didn't understand why he was angry, but I nodded anyway. As I turned to leave, Rockey suddenly asked, do we really need to keep things this clear-cut? Of course. I looked at him seriously. Rockey, I've paid off everything I owe you. From now on, we're even. Even? Rockey sneered. Our corp has supported you all these years, and you think this little amount makes us even? I froze. When I realized what he meant, anger surged in me. Rockey, when my family went bankrupt, I was in my senior year of high school. My tuition was already paid, and I had money left on my meal card. So I never took a penny from Rockey except for the occasional meal when I went home on holidays. When I got to college, I had a scholarship and never asked your parents for anything. After graduating, we got married. You gave me a card, and I returned it to you after the divorce. You know I didn't spend a cent of it. I picked up the card from the floor and put it back on the desk. I already repaid you for 8 million, and this card has 6 million. Consider the extra amount as covering my board and lodging while living at Rockey's. Rockey, you bought back that bracelet for 8 million, right? So, I haven't taken advantage of you or our corp. I smiled, looking him in the eye. If we're being precise, you owe me more. But that's all water under the bridge, and I won't ask you to return any of it. With that, I turned and left. Behind me, I heard Rockey's angry voice. What do I owe you? Explain it to me. I didn't answer, nor did I turn back. As I walked out of his office, I saw the same man from the reception desk. The one who'd accused me of trying to cling to a rich man. He politely pressed the elevator button for me, smiling as he saw me off. By the time I landed back in New York, it was already dark. I was about to message Peter when I looked up and saw him waiting for me at the arrivals gate. How did you know which flight I was on? Peter replied, just a guess. As I sat on the back of his second-hand motorcycle, I suddenly said, you should have messaged me, then you wouldn't have had to wait at the airport all day. But the roar of the motorcycle and the rush of the wind drowned out my words. Peter didn't hear me. It was too loud tonight, too noisy. Victoria Harbor was packed with people. Fireworks burst across the dark sky. I said, the fireworks are beautiful. And then I heard a faint, so are you. It was a year later when the movie finally wrapped up. Throughout the year, I'd frequently receive calls from unknown numbers and messages from strangers. Whenever I picked up, there was only silence on the other end. The messages were filled with insignificant, vague well wishes. I suspected they were from Rockey, so I blocked each number as they came. Sometimes, I really didn't understand what Rockey was thinking. Someone who barely cared when we were married suddenly wanted to keep tabs on me after the divorce. Asterisk Haley, congrats on wrapping up the film. Grandma told me some things I didn't know before. Could we meet to talk sometime? Asterisk. Just then, a trending news notification popped up. Yet another rumor linking Rockey to a popular actress. In the past, anything related to Rockey, I'd click on and read carefully. He rarely reached out, and my messages went unanswered. So the only way I knew what he was up to was by following the headlines. But now, I simply swiped the notification away, deleted his message, and blocked his number. After packing my things, I walked out of the dressing room and saw Peter and Jack chatting. Whatever Jack had said made Peter laugh softly. Then, as he looked up, he took the cigarette Jack was about to light. Jack pouted and complained, why? Now I can't even smoke? Peter casually tossed the cigarette into the nearby trash. We're going to dinner soon. Haley doesn't like the smell of smoke. You can smoke when you get home after dinner. Jack raised his eyebrows and teased, Peter, you're different with Haley. Do you fancy her? Peter smiled without denying it. So Jack went on, if you like her, Peter, you should go after her. There are plenty of people interested in her. If you don't act, someone else will. A shiver ran through me as I missed a step. After leaving the hospital, Peter drove me to the hotel. He paused at the door, asking, can I help you inside? I'd sprained my ankle badly and could barely stand. Director Peter, if you don't, I might have to crawl my way in. Peter chuckled and carried me inside. As he went to get a towel in the bathroom, I remembered that Peter often stopped at my door. He never entered any actress's room lightly. People teased him, there are too many paparazzi around. Director Peter really cares about his reputation. Peter explained, I don't mind, but it's harder for an actress to clear up rumors. No one in the crew ever spoke badly of him. It was no wonder everyone respected and trusted him so much. Hearing a knock, I asked Peter to answer the door. Who is it? I turned, just in time to see Rockey's stunned face outside the door. He looked at Peter, frowning, and then shifted his gaze past him to me. With a questioning tone, Rockey asked, who is he? What were you two doing in here? Haley, have you forgotten your place? I've always hated the way Rockey talks down to me like that. When I used to like him, I convinced myself to tolerate it. But now, I feel no need to keep putting up with it. What place? I turned back, asking him coldly, Rockey, have you forgotten? We're nothing to each other now. It was as if he suddenly remembered that we were already divorced. His expression froze for a moment, then he looked bitter, asking, Haley, can we talk? There was nothing left for us to discuss. But I knew Rockey well enough to know that if I didn't agree, he'd keep pestering me. He's the type who won't let things go until he gets what he wants. Fine, what do you want to talk about? Rockey didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked at Peter. Tell him to leave. I laughed coolly. I understood he didn't want anyone knowing about our past relationship. I looked at Peter. Before I could say anything, he took the hint and said, I'll step out. Call me if you need anything. He left, closing the door softly. As they passed each other, their gazes met with a subtle intensity. Once the door shut, I asked Rockey, what is it you want to talk about? Grandma told me that we once had a child. Rockey's tone was urgent. Is that true? If he hadn't believed his grandmother, I don't think he would have flown all the way to New York to see me. It's true. I hadn't told him back then because I knew he didn't care. But now that he already knew, there was no point in hiding it. I asked him, is that the reason you came to New York? Rockey looked unsettled. He gazed at me, shaking his head slightly. Yes and no. Haley, after you left, I missed you. That made me laugh for some reason. My reaction seemed to deepen the sadness on his face. I'm telling the truth. I just didn't realize before that I actually liked you. Whether you believe it or not, you've been in my heart all along. I kept laughing, the same way he used to mock me countless times before. Rockey, don't dwell on things that are already gone. Whether it's me or that child. Our child had been an accident. Rockey had once told me he wouldn't touch any woman besides Serena. That time with me happened only because he was drunk. and I was too sick with a bad cold to fight him off. The next morning, he was already gone. I managed to get up, took more cold medicine, and drifted back to sleep. A few months later, Grandma noticed something was off, took me to the hospital, and we found out I was pregnant. That New Year's, you were upset and accidentally pushed me into the water. You knew I could swim and assumed I'd get myself out, so you just walked away. But it was winter, and my clothes were heavy. I kept getting sick after I became pregnant, and it took all my strength to barely pull myself out. When I finally went to the hospital, the doctor said I'd stayed in the icy water too long and advised me to let go of the pregnancy. That day, I was planning to tell you about the baby, to ask if you wanted to keep it. Rocky's pupils trembled. His lips quivered, and he looked at me for a long time before saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." Whether he knew or not didn't really matter. With the way he treated me back then, even if he had known, I don't think he'd have wanted to keep that child. It's fine. It's all in the past. A child who wasn't wanted by either parent. Maybe not being born was the luckiest thing for them. I looked at him and smiled. Rocky, is there anything else you wanted to say? If not, could you leave? I need to rest. He could tell I was asking him to leave. He turned slowly. Just as he reached for the door, I called out to him, "Rocky." Rocky quickly turned back to me, his eyes filled with hope. "Peter is probably right outside. Could you ask him to come in? Thank you." I watched the light in his eyes fade away bit by bit. He laughed bitterly. "Haley, his name isn't Peter." Rocky glanced at Peter, who had just returned, and then continued to address me. "He's Peter Jr., the only heir of New York's P Group. You've known him for quite a while now. Has he never told you his real name?" Seeing the stiffness on Peter's face, I knew that Rocky must be telling the truth. After Rocky left, Peter Jr., helped me to the bed. I said to him, "Thank you, good night." But Peter didn't leave. He remained by my bed. He asked, "Haley, is there anything you want to ask me?" I shook my head. No. Everyone has their secrets. And my relationship with Peter wasn't one where we needed to reveal everything to each other. The movie premiered simultaneously in New York and on the mainland. After finishing my work in New York, I returned to Toronto. Everyone thought the movie's huge success was a lucky break. But I knew from the beginning that it would be a hit, and that as the lead actress, I'd make a triumphant comeback. Otherwise, I wouldn't have sold my mother's bracelet. I saw Peter again 3 days after returning to Toronto. He showed up outside my door with a suitcase, cautiously asking, "Haley, could you let me stay for a couple of days?" Suddenly, I recalled the night I left New York when I went to say goodbye to him and Jack. I'd overheard him telling Jack, "Haley's going back to Toronto." Jack rolled his eyes. "Haven't you told her how you feel yet?" "I'm afraid it would be too abrupt. I don't want to upset her." "Peter, how can you be so sharp-minded in everything but clueless when it comes to Haley?" Peter sighed. "I don't know. I'm always so careful with her, constantly afraid of making the wrong move." He looked at the beer Jack offered, shaking his head. "No, Haley doesn't like drunks." Jack said, "She's not here. Even if she's not here, I won't drink. I'd hate for her to find out and be disappointed in me." I looked at Peter standing outside my door and smiled to myself. I asked, "Why are you in Toronto?" Peter replied, "I'm here to chase you and to tell you that I like you." He was so direct that I felt flustered, even thinking I could pretend not to have heard him to avoid the situation. Peter seemed to read my mind and sighed. "Haley, I knew you'd react this way, which is why I was hesitant to confess. At work, you can make bold decisions, but when it comes to relationships, you always choose to run." I consulted a doctor friend, and she said that because of past emotional scars, you've developed a habit of avoiding relationships to protect yourself. "Haley, I'm not here expecting you to reciprocate equally. I'm just here to tell you that I like you. You don't need to force yourself to break down your walls or try to like me back. My liking you is enough. Haley, all you need to do is accept my feelings and enjoy them." After a pause, he softly apologized. "Sorry, am I scaring you? I prepared so many things to say before coming to Toronto, but when I saw you, I forgot everything." Looking at his anxious, uneasy face reminded me of how I once felt. The one who loves is humble, while the one who's loved is proud. I smiled, stepping aside to let him in. While the production team was calling me about trending topics, Peter was asking what I wanted for dinner. "Haley, handle it however you think is best. We'll fully support you from our end." When I checked my phone, I saw waves of insults pouring in. People were digging up an old scandal where Rocky's rumored girlfriend had accused me of being a homewrecker. Why is someone with such bad character still making movies? To be honest, the movie's success is really due to the director and script. Anyone could have played the lead and made it a hit. "Haley, can you just get out of the entertainment industry?" Before, I hadn't been able to respond since my assistant managed my account. But now, I was in control and didn't have to stay silent anymore. Just as I was about to post a clarification, I noticed Rocky's recent statement, "Haley and I are married." After all these years, he was finally willing to reveal our marriage, but I felt nothing. I deleted the text I'd written and posted details about our marriage and divorce dates. Public opinion on the internet shifted instantly. I looked over at Peter, who was making dinner, and suddenly said, "Peter, I'm divorced." I know. He replied softly, then continued with his cooking. And with that, I realized there was nothing left for me to explain to him. During dinner, Peter opened up to me about his secret. I took my mother's surname. My father doesn't support my filmmaking and won't let me use any family connections. He even forbade anyone from lending me money. He wants to force me to come back and inherit the family business, saying I don't have any talent for directing. To be honest, he's not entirely wrong. I really don't have much talent. I looked at him, puzzled. What nonsense. Everyone says you're a genius director. Peter shook his head. That's only because of you. With you as my lead actress, I was able to make a good film. Haley, some people failed to see your brilliance, while I, who borrowed just a sliver of your light, am praised as a genius. That night, as I lay in bed, I saw Peter's statement about leaving the industry. I was never a genius. This movie succeeded because my lead actress played my leading lady. After winning awards for the film, I started getting more opportunities. After visiting a mentor and preparing to leave, I noticed security guards trying to capture a small cat. It reminded me of Juno. The kitten looked so much like Juno, even down to the little bib around its neck. I went over to check, and the moment it saw me, it meowed and ran over to me. After seeing its ID tag, I was sure it was Juno. I asked the security guards, "What do you plan to do with it?" One shrugged, giving a helpless smile. They didn't say anything, but I knew that if I left Juno with them, she probably wouldn't survive the night. In the end, I couldn't bear it. I took Juno to Rocky's place. By chance, I saw someone leaving Rocky's house, Bame. I hadn't seen him in a while, and he looked disheveled and defeated. I remembered the recent rumor about him going to Washington with a toy gun to crash a wedding. When Rocky saw me, he rushed over. He said, "You know Bame. He got himself into trouble, and his father's sending him abroad. So he came to say goodbye." I had no interest in his friend's problems. I simply handed Juno over to him. Juno went missing. I found her on my way back. Juno was mischievous. She'd gotten lost once when I took care of her before. I thought this time would be like before, but Rocky pushed her away with disgust. "She didn't get lost," he said, kicking her aside. "I don't want her anymore. You left me because of her, so if you hate her, I'll get rid of her too." He looked at me. "Haley, can't we start over? Without Juno this time, we can finally live together." Looking at Juno, who was terrified of him, made my heart grow cold. I didn't know what she'd gone through, but I knew Rocky was the cause. No, since he didn't want Juno, there was nothing left to discuss. I took her and left. While driving, Juno curled up on my lap. No matter how many times I pushed her away, she'd suddenly become clingy, trying to please me the same way she used to with Rocky. But even so, I had no plans to keep her. I'm soft-hearted but firm. Anyone who's hurt me, whether a person or a cat, will not be forgiven. Haley, I looked up to see Serena stepping out of her yard as my car approached. I'd met Serena at the film premiere. She had waited backstage for a long time and was overjoyed when she saw me, asking if we could take a photo together. She said, "Haley, I'm a huge fan of yours." In truth, the moment I saw her, I'd recognized her. Rocky still had a photo of her from when she was 16 in his study drawer. Serena at 16 looked no different than she did in her 30s. "Is this the stray cat?" Serena petted Juno. "It looks so much like the one I gave away before. I wonder if they ever took good care of her." I felt a shift in my heart and asked, "Who did you give the cat to?" Serena was too focused on Juno and replied absently, "A former neighbor." The breeze tousled my hair. I chuckled quietly. Rocky probably never expected that. In Serena's eyes, he was just a former neighbor. As I left, Serena promised, "Don't worry, Haley, I'll take good care of her. You know how much I love cats." After divorcing Rocky, I essentially cut all ties with our family business. But Rocky's grandmother unexpectedly called me. She said she was sick and wanted me to visit her. Rocky's grandmother had always been kind to me. Since she was sick and wanted to see me, of course, I had to go. I asked Peter, an elder who took good care of me is ill. "Can you come with me to visit her?" Peter was all too eager. Since leaving the industry, he'd become my assistant and could hardly stand being away from me. It wasn't until I met Rocky's grandmother that I realized her illness was just a ploy, and the real reason was to get me to see Rocky. She said, "I know I can only use this trick to fool you once. Haley, Rocky says he understands his mistakes. He wants to see you, to beg for another chance. As she said this, Rockey was standing by her side, staring intently at me. I ignored him completely. Pulling Peter closer, I introduced him to Rockey's grandmother. "Grandma, I brought my boyfriend with me to visit you today. His name is Peter." At this, Rockey reacted intensely. "Impossible. You're lying." He moved as if to grab me, but Peter stepped in front of me immediately. Rockey's grandmother stopped Rockey at the same time. "Haley, it was foolish of me." As I left Rockey's house, he continued to chase after me. Then suddenly, his grandmother slapped him across the face. "How much longer are you going to keep this up? You're the one who wronged Haley. She's doing well now. Can't you just let her be?" The doors of our family estate slowly closed behind me. No matter what went on inside, I couldn't hear it anymore. It was a bright, sunny day. Peter held my hand and asked, "Did you just say I'm your boyfriend?" I kept my gaze forward and continued walking, responding as I went. Peter's grin stretched from ear to ear. "Haley, I knew it. I knew that one day, I'd earn my place." The end. If you like Puppy's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.